Firstly, just good afternoon, welcome. I would like to say thank you to Kayla and the team at the North Queensland PHN just for organising this session, and also to yourselves for taking the time out of your busy day. I know that's always hard, especially on a Friday, but we're nearly at the weekend. Um, Firstly, just best practice software does acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and recognise their unique cultural and spiritual relationships to the land, waters, and seas and their rich contribution to society. And we pay our respects to ancestors and elders, past, present, and emerging. And best practice software respects Maori as the Tangata Whenua and Treaty of Waitangi partners in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So I'm actually really excited about today. I always find it really awesome when we can engage with the PHNs and also with yourselves to kind of deliver a bit of a custom session. Part of your registration, we did ask you for sort of what sort of topics you would like us to talk about. And this is sort of why I've come up with this list. There is also a Q&A section in the Teams meeting. So if you do sort of have any questions throughout the session, please do type them in there. I have left a little bit of time at the end of this session to hopefully circle back and go through anything that you do type in that Q&A section. So even if it's in the first 5 minutes, please feel free just to put something in there and then I will try and circle back and answer as much as I can. This session is recorded as well. That will be supplied to North Queensland PHN. I believe they're going to put that on their website for you as well, so you can always come back and rewatch the recording if you need to. A little bit rude from me, actually. My name's Nicole. I should have started with that. I'm actually one of the trainers here at Best Practice Software. I've been training for nearly 4 years now. Before that, I've got a background in education and IT, and I sort of worked with sort of best practice at clinics and things before I started training it. So that's just a little bit about me. What we will be talking about today, we've got an hour and a half, and hopefully we'll have a bit of time for that Q&A at the end. But pretty much what we're going to go through is, first off, I guess, what resources you possibly have available to you. We've got the knowledge base, there's the BP forum, we've obviously got training. There is also, contact us on the website if you want to potentially log any enhancement requests and things, you can do that through there. And then obviously also on our website, we've got the whole partner network that you can have a bit of a look at through there if you want to kind of integrate with something else. But we'll just have a bit of a sneak peek at all of that. I did want to look at data cleansing. In particular, probably uncoded clinical diagnoses that you can fix them up in BT utility, depending on how you use your clinical reminders, if you're letting people free type reminders, where you then can go back and essentially just clean that up. I did just want to show you in the reporting tool, not so much a data cleansing thing, but in our reporting tool, there is the ability that you can upload your My Medicare patient list and then essentially bulk mark all of those patients as registered with My Medicare. I just wanted to show you where that was. I can't entirely demonstrate that because I don't have a list of patients because I'm not actually a practice. But I just wanted to show that to you. It is also really well documented though in the KB and the knowledge base if you do want to go back and have a bit of a look at that as well. The database search, potentially you have sort of some other tools that you might use to extract data out of your BP database, whether that be Cubico or Pencat or one of the other tools that are out there. I did just want to go through the database search itself though, and essentially what you can extract just natively within BP, because there is some sort of interesting things that you can do in there. I've got clinical tips and management tips, just a few things in there that might be helpful. Hopefully there's something through there that you might sort of pick up that you didn't already know. I've got on there reminders and recalls. I'll go through that, I guess, at a fairly high level. In the knowledge base, there is a reminders and recalls webinar that goes for sort of 30 or 40 minutes that really goes through that whole process, kind of start to finish quite thoroughly. look for that in the knowledge base, but we will kind of go through it as a bit more of a high level. And then we've obviously got our Q&A. So please feel free to put anything in there sort of whilst I am talking. And then again, I will circle back to that at the end and try and answer as much of that as I possibly can. That's, I guess, the plan of attack. I'll just flick my screen over though, and we'll get stuck into actually Prem itself. So I guess the first thing is just what resources that you have available to you if you need them. So I guess within the software itself, you can always come up to help. You can go to online, you can hit F1 on your keyboard. There's also the little light bulb icon that's been in there in the last few releases of the software as well. But if you come in here, it will just take you to the knowledge base. A fairly recent, I guess, change to this is that you can just Google this now as well. It used to be that you had to have the URL or you had to access it through the software. That's not the case anymore. On any device that has internet, you can just search for best practice software knowledge base and you will get to this screen, which is also good as well. The knowledge base, I really hope you've been here already. I won't sort of give you the real simplified version because hopefully you've been here, but you can do a search. You can always go through and kind of choose your own adventure through here as well if you need to. Getting started is really good for your new staff that start. It will break down new starters into roles, and if you've got a new receptionist starting, you can let them loose in there, and essentially it'll give you those articles that will kind of give them the basics before they sort of start kind of helping out at the front desk. Same for doctors, nurses, or your other users that goes through them. There are also obviously the tiles that people can just go and have a bit of a look through as well if they need it. I did want to go through though just this videos and documents section just as a little bit more. Again, hopefully you've been in here, but just a few things in here. One is the tutorial videos. So, I mean, whilst these videos are embedded in the article that they're talking about, if you did have someone who just had a little bit of free time as they're, drinking their cup of tea at morning tea or something like that, they could just come in here and have a bit of a look at some of these videos. As an example, if we go into reception, it might be that they want to watch the video on booking an appointment that will take them 1 minute and 16 seconds, or, putting in a family member that takes them 41 seconds. They're all fairly quick videos, sort of short and sharp to the point, but it's good to know that they kind of exist here in a pocket without always just finding them through their own knowledge base article. Also in this section, down the bottom, we do have our document library. I'm just going to open that one up. There's a few things in here. The big one is obviously these quick reference guides. If you haven't looked at them already, I would suggest just going and having a bit of a look at them. Most of them are 1 page. There's a couple that go across 2 pages, but they're all real sort of high level instructions on how to do something in particular. So whatever kind of topic that they're talking about using the subpoena tool as an example. It does kind of help bridge that gap between, again, maybe more sort of newer staff who may not be completely confident with what they're doing, but they kind of roughly know. It does just give them a little bit of hand holding sort of until they do feel sort of really confident with whatever that workflow might be. But there's lots of different ones in here to have a bit of a look at. Just at the top here, these are relatively new. I mean, probably 6 or 12 months new, but we do have our daily setup checklist, which I realise that everyone is going to have their own, end of day, start of day processes with, tills and opening doors and all sorts of things that is not BP specific. But these are just a few things that we've, I guess, thought would be helpful if you're not already doing to potentially embed into sort of your end of day, start of day processes. Things like running the bulk checks in the morning and making sure that, all your billings are done for yesterday, or if you've still got some providers who like to have a list of who they're seeing today, that you can print them out. Just little bits and pieces in here, nurses making sure that you're checking for the unallocated reports that have come in. have a look. I'm sure you're probably mostly doing all of this anyway, if not all of it. It is just nice to have a bit of a look, just as a bit of a check and balance in there. So definitely check that out. The other thing is just the onboarding and offboarding. So I guess a few steps that you will need to do if you've got sort of a new user and a new doctor starting, who do we need to tell, whether that's, ERX to get their e-prescribing to work, or, all those little steps that you might need to go through when they start. And then also thinking about the things that you might need to close that loop on if they do leave. Again, they're probably all things that you are, all over, but it is just good just to have a bit of a list in there, just to a bit of a sanity check as well. I'll go back to this previous screen. Just the last thing in here I wanted to talk about is these webinar and feature videos. So again, if you've been sort of a fairly lengthy user of best practice, you would have hopefully come to one of those sessions, whether it's a masterclass on what the new release is going to include, or whether it's maybe a be in the know on a particular topical thing that we run. We do try and run them sort of semi-regularly. Whilst, yes, it's good to come to the live session because you obviously get to ask your questions and, whether they can get answered during the session or not. But if you were then to come back in here to watch the recording, I'll just go into this be in the know one. For example, the chronic condition changes last year. So yes, you can rewatch that recording, but also what we do off the back of that is any of those questions that were asked, whether they were answered or not during the session, but they actually get compiled as part of that sort of final recording, and we will actually then provide the answers and any resources and things that go along with those answers. Obviously, there's not usually so many questions, but that was a fairly topical change that happened last year. So yes, the recording's great, but sometimes there's some really good questions that were asked, and then obviously the answers off the back of those questions is good to know that this little place exists in the knowledge base as well. But I'll hop out of here. Just with the website, I might just bring that up here. I mean, it has changed a little bit recently as well. There's a new website out. Only a few things I want to point out on here though. In resources, you've got the forum or a link to the forum. Not the knowledge base. I mean, the knowledge base is the official sort of how-to kind of guide to using the software, but the forum is designed a little bit more for you collectively as users to go in there. There's quite a number of sort of experienced users in there that do provide some really decent information in there. It's not bad to know if you haven't already got an account and you use that or have a look at that. Also to know that that exists. I know that there's, Facebook groups and other bits and pieces as well that you can access, but it's just another piece of that puzzle to know that that exists. We do also have training as well. I mean, the knowledge base is obviously all provided for free. We do obviously other training and things for free as well. But if you did want sort of potentially some more custom, like I want to talk about this list of things, or I have a list of these questions that I really just want someone to kind of work through with me. If you come into the training tab, there's all sorts of different training that you can have, but if you were looking more at that sort of custom training, go and have a look in the remote training, send us a query. You can always just email us through, we're training@bpsoftware.net, email us through and we can always try and work out what that kind of looks like for you as well. And also in the website, you can sort of contact us. And you can log enhancements as well, just through the general contact in the website. If you think of something, you can always log enhancement through support as well. Even if you were to send them to us, we can always log them on your behalf as well, just to try and get a bit of a list of what people are like to see in the software, and hopefully we can build that into a future roadmap. Data cleansing. So probably the big one for that is the uncoded clinical diagnosis. Probably just to take that step back for context, and again, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, but just so that I don't sort of miss anyone potentially, if I go into a clinical record, what I'm talking about is when the doctors go to diagnose a condition within their consult. So they would come down here, they would go to diagnosis, and they start searching for whatever that diagnosis might be. So let's say, for example, this patient has got asthma. Sometimes what the doctors will do is, even if they start searching here and they double click on it to copy that wording over to the right hand side. So I guess just one more piece to that puzzle, actually. This is a clinically coded list, which is what we need the diagnosis to be. When I double click here, I do get the clinically coded item over here on the right hand side in this diagnosis field. If I were to then type anything within that field, or even if I didn't search for something and I just physically typed asthma over here, it actually is not clinically coded anymore. The downside of that is that it doesn't get recorded properly in the database, and therefore we can't report on it, whether that be the database search or whether we're extracting, de-identified information. It doesn't quite record that properly because it's not clinically coded. They would typically, hopefully, use the tick boxes where they can. They do also have further details as well if they kind of want to type something in there that's beyond sort of what they can double click on. But ideally, they should just be double clicking in here. So if they go rogue and if they type, severe, and it's a provisional diagnosis, whatever else they want to type in there, that diagnosis is not clinically coded. To then potentially see if that's what's happening and also to clean that data up, we do need to go into BP Utilities. So it is a separate little application for you to run. If you go to the Windows logo, you can just start typing in here and do a bit of a search. But I'm just going to go and find it in my best practice folder in here. It is the same PyFinch, it's just got its wings sort of outstretched instead, but it's just BP Utilities here. You will need to log into it because not everyone can get in here, and you don't want everyone to be able to get in here either. So I'm just going to log into that. And you get the BP Utilities screen. There's other little bits and pieces in here. I'll show you a couple other things, but let's look at that uncoded diagnosis first. So if I scroll down, it's like a little paintbrush looking icon. It says cleanup history. If I double click on that, these are the items that have not been clinically coded through that diagnosis field. And I guess to kind of fix them and make them clinically coded, we just select them here on the left-hand side, and then I can do a search back in my clinically coded list to be, whatever I want it to be. And then I just choose from that list what it should have been in the first place. So I don't know, let's say it's contraceptive oral in here. When I click replace, it goes and fixes that up in the database and makes it clinically coded. And then we could just rinse and repeat in here to kind of fix them up. If this is not something that you've looked at before to potentially clean up, make sure you are sitting down when you go in here, because sometimes this list can be quite lengthy, but it does just kind of need cleaning up. Hop out of here. Just while we're in this screen, other things that might be helpful for you, more towards the top, you've got all these deleted things. So, obviously when we accidentally or even on purpose delete things from the front end, we don't necessarily want to remove that from the database. So even though we do delete it, it does get stored, it just gets hidden from the front end. So say someone said, oh, I accidentally deleted a patient instead of marking them as inactive. You can come in here to deleted patients and you can open that up, find that patient, and you can recover them. I'll see if I've got Todd. So I could recover Todd, and it then pushes that back to the front end of Premiere that we can look at and then do whatever else we need to do with it from there. It's the same concept for you've got visits, you've got correspondence, you've got deleted users, you've got contacts, you've got account holders in here as well. If you need it, it's there. If hopefully people don't accidentally delete stuff that we need to recover, then obviously we don't need to worry about it. One more thing in here and then I'll hop out. The security audit. So if I jump into here, again, more so if something's not quite right, or you might have had a little bit of a computer scare somewhere or something like that, you can just come in here and obviously look at your user logins. You've also got anyone who's possibly changed their password, but you've also got permission changes as well in here. So I mean, ideally, hopefully that ability to change people's permission is fairly locked down to the practice manager or sort of certain sort of higher users that aren't going to sort of do the wrong thing or whatever that looks like. But you can just come in here and it will tell you what permission was changed and also the user who it was that changed it, if potentially you need sort of any extra information through there. But I'll hop out of utilities. I will leave that clinical record open though, because we'll come back to that later. I'll just go back to my main screen. So still on sort of the data cleansing bus, probably just really the clinical reminders. So in setup and configuration, you do have a reminder section in here. So up the top, you've got the name of all of your clinical reminders that people can choose from when they're putting in a reminder. You can add to that list. You can call it whatever you need to call it. You can choose a default interval, which is not set in stone either. It just defaults to that. Whoever's putting in that reminder can still change that if they need to, but you've got those options in there. Down the bottom here, you've got two tick boxes. So the first one is, would you like to allow free text reminders, which does just mean that users can free type a reminder instead of picking from the list that you've given them. You've also then got the option of can they write a comment as well in there, whether you want them to be able to do that or not. If we are allowing them to free type though, and whether your reminders get sent out through BP or, automatically through one of the online booking, HotDoc or AutoMed or whatever that looks like, it will usually, part of that messaging will be, hey, you're due for whatever the name of the clinical reminder is. If you are allowing people just to free type in there, sometimes they might type something that isn't always what you want to send to the patient, whether it's, a little bit more clinical that they've put in, blood test and then listed a whole heap of, very specific types of pathology requests in there that we don't really want the patient to necessarily read. It's just going to be a little bit confusing for them. It might be that we just want that to say, you're due for a blood test, and then obviously the doctor will tell them sort of what that's for and what to test for. If we are free typing though, you can come up to clean up here, and the left, similar to that cleanup of the uncoded diagnosis, the left is what people have typed, the right is our list. So we can come in here and say, okay, well, they've typed, influenza immunization, influenza vaccination, and I don't know, maybe something else in there. I'll just grab this one as well. So you can hold down control and you can sort of just select the very specific ones that you want on the left there. And then on the right hand side here, you can choose which ones you actually do want to match that up to. So let's say all of those should just be influenza immunization as an example. When I click on change, it will just go and change those wording over to be sort of the approved list. And then all those reminders that get kind of sent out after that will have sort of the approved wording on it instead of necessarily something that's a little bit messy. I'll just change that and hop out of here. Just coming back to these two, if I were to untick them and I save that, what that actually looks like in the clinical record when they go to make a new one is the first tick box is talking about this field, so they can't free type anything in there. The second tick box is talking about the comment field, so we can't type in there either. So it just grays out, so they're forced to pick from the list. Whether that's something that you want to do or not, you've just got the ability if you need to. I'll hop out of here. Just that My Medicare import before I forget about it. It is also in a little external utility. I'll just hop out of here. It is part of the reporting tool though. If you don't already have this and you don't use it for anything else, have a look in the knowledge base for reporting tool and you'll find it. And then obviously just download it in here. So we've got my import my Medicare. Again, there's also a knowledge base article that goes through, where you get that list, because it's in HPOS that you go and you download a list of all your patients that are registered. It puts it in a little CSV file, like an Excel file as such. And then basically once you have that file, if you import My Medicare here, it does ask you to log in. And again, it's the same password. It's just a permission whether you can do it or not. And then it will ask you for that file that you're loading up. So give it that CSV file that you've downloaded out of HPOS. On the next screen, which I'm sorry I can't quite demonstrate, it will then give a list of all those patients, and then you basically make sure that they are going to match up with your doctors and locations and things like that. And then you basically press the button at the end of it and it will go and tick all of those boxes in those patients sort of as you work your way through. If you are My Medicare registered, it's not a bad thing just to go and do like a bulk import instead of necessarily having to go and do them one by one, which you can also go and do as well if you want to through their demographic. I'll hop out of there. Still a little bit on the data cleansing train, but when we start talking about the database search, so on this main screen here, if I come up to utilities, I've got a search, and this screen does look a little bit crazy to start with, and it will possibly look a little bit crazier again when we start adding some filters to it. What we're doing here is we're actually talking directly to the database. And the reason why this is in a bit of a weird format is it's written in SQL, which is actually the programming language of the database. By no means are you expected to go and get an IT degree to be able to do stuff in here. That's just what's happening. By default, when you do first come in here though, this is saying that I want to select all of my patients who are currently active, and it's going to order them by their last name or their surname and then their first name. If that's all I want, if I just want a list of all of my active patients, I can run that query over here on the right. And for me, I've got 94 patients who are currently active in my little training data set. Obviously, you'll have probably significantly more than that. From here, though, you can go and narrow that down. So you might say, okay, yep, I want my active patients, but I only want them to show up in the list if they're adults, so if they're 18 or over. So all the buttons along the top here are extra criteria that you can add into your search. So if we say, demographics, these are all the things that we can search on and add to my query. So there's one in here for age. I'll go age, and I'll say that it's greater than or equal to, and I'll put 18 in here. The only sort of tricky thing in here is you do need to make sure that you click add. So when I click add to, age is greater than or equal to 18, it does put it in weird SQL wording. We don't necessarily need to entirely understand that because we know what we've asked it for. But when I go OK, it's going to put that into the mix in my query here. So if I run that again, well, for me, I've only dropped 4 patients who are under 18, but you might potentially drop a few more than that. But now I've got active patients who are 18 and over. You can keep going with that. We might then say, okay, what about if I want to give a list of patients who are taking a particular medication, or maybe that they're not taking that particular medication, or maybe they have a specific condition that we're looking for, like diabetes or asthma or whatever that looks like. Or maybe they're active patients who don't have asthma. We can use the not to do the not asthma people in here. You've got visits, you've got immunisations. Again, if you're looking for people who, have or have not had immunisations done in, a period of time, you might be looking for all of the patients who had an immunisation out of a very specific batch number. If, there was like a recall on a batch or something like that, you can filter that in here. Cervical screening, there are a few more filters in here than there used to be. This got changed again, probably 6-9-ish months, give or take, ago now, that you do sort of have more filtering in here as well that you can choose from. Observations, if it's, I don't know, their BMI is above a particular range, or, there's also some family and social history as well in here. So you can build out to be very specifically what you're looking for in here. And then once you've changed it, just make sure that you run it. Actually, I'll go and put asthma as a condition because I think I've got a few patients who have that. So asthma in their past history, and means they have to have asthma and all of the other things that we've asked for. And remember, don't forget to click add in here, and I'll go okay. So again, adds an extra wording, which looks a little bit crazy, but we don't necessarily need to entirely understand that because we know we've asked them for asthma. And then I'm just going to run that query again. So I've dropped a lot of patients. I've dropped, 81 patients again. So now for me, I've got 9 patients who are active, who are 18 and over, and they also have, asthma as part of their past history. With that list, you're like, well, what do I do then with that list? I mean, up in the file menu, you've got some options. You can just save that list if potentially you want to put it in something else to do something with it. Maybe, I don't know, we give it to an online booking and it sends out text messages to them or something like that. You've got options there, but you're just going to save it. You can print it if you want to print a copy of it, and maybe it's a list that the nurse needs to work their way through or something like that. You can also do a mail merge in here. So say, I mean, not so much asthma, but say if I did, all of my active patients who have diabetes, and maybe you have a diabetes educator who's starting next month, you could, providing obviously we've got SMS consent for people, you could come in here, generate that list of patients. You could then send them an SMS, which, if you've got BP comms, you can go and make your own templates to use. So you could make a template that says, hey, we've got a diabetes educator starting next month, call the practice to book an appointment. And you could send that text message out to all of those patients in that list with that message as a bit more of sort of proactive health to a degree. So it's pretty cool that you can do some things in there. Anyone who doesn't have SMS consent, you do have the option of just printing out a letter for them, but you could do what I've done here, where I'm like, well, I just want to capture the SMS people, and maybe unfortunately I don't want to sort of be mailing out letters to the others. Or you could still print them a letter, even print it to PDF, and you could separately outside of BP email them a copy of that if you really wanted to. I'll hop out of here. If you do make your own query, you can save it. Like if you think, oh, this is probably something that I'm going to use again in the future, and I don't always want to have to recreate it from scratch, you can save that query, obviously just wherever you want to save it to that you're going to remember so you can find it again later, but you can save that query. Which does bring us to, what if you save a query, how do you then rerun it in the future? So up the top here, you've got a load query, which is also then more exciting things. So BP does come with a whole list of supplied queries that you can use. So probably before you go and make your own query and spend that time doing that, I would just have a look at the supplied ones first, just to see if potentially there's something in there already that you could just use that meets, whatever criteria that you're looking for. So just in here, and again, if you search in the knowledge base for database search, you're going to find this folder path, but this is where it gets installed by default. So it's in C Drive, it's in program files. I've got best practice software, I've got BPS. I know we're a few folders deep now. And then there is a supplied queries folder. Within this folder, there's the 4 kind of groups of queries. So clinical, as an example, so it's all about, patients who have and haven't had things done, who meet age criteria, haven't had their health assessment done, whatever that kind of looks for. There's lots of options in here. Deceased patients with active reminders. Usually there's a bit of a catch with whatever's sending out your reminders to not send them to deceased patients, but maybe that's not a bad thing to go and clean up, just to make sure that they don't accidentally ever get sent to a deceased patient. But there's all sorts of different things in here. Some good ones to know about, though, is, if I keep going down a little bit further, you do have your patients with no allergy or reactions information recorded. So that's just saying that in their record, they don't have a reaction recorded and they don't have the nil known tick box ticked. So we should be going back and recording that information. If I wanted to run that query, I just double click on it here. This looks crazy, but that's okay because we know what we're looking for there, and then run that query. So for me, I've got 85 patients who I haven't got any reactions or allergies or nil known recorded for. So I've got a fair bit of cleanup to do in my database. You could print that list out and kind of work your way through. You can even click on the little 3 people in the top left here. If you say, we're going to call people, and I'm going to call Kathleen and say, hey, just checking you don't have any allergies. I could then go into her record and record that and kind of move on to the next person, if you want to do that. Other load queries, though, towards the bottom, you've got things like, no smoking history. Maybe you're doing a bit of a drive to collect their smoking history. So again, load up that query, run it. You've then got that list of patients that you're kind of working with. In the other folders, not necessarily a clinical one, but if I just drop that down, the demographic one has a few that are good as well. You've got, people who, have no ethnicity recorded. So again, we should be recording that. You could run that query, get that list of patients, and obviously go and record their ethnicity. Things like the duplicate patients is a good one. So, it just happens that sometimes we end up with duplicate patients, whether that be, the online booking can't match them, so it just makes a new record, or we just somehow end up with more than one copy of the same patient. What you can do in here is you can search on those duplicate patients. So I'll double click that query, I'll load it up. In here, you've got all this text and I can run that query in here. So for me, I've only got, essentially, 3 patients that I have a bit of a duplicate for, but, we could then go through and actually merge those records together. And if you're not sure how to merge, check out the knowledge base. It's pretty well documented in there as well, how to merge patients. The other one in here, the last one I'll talk about, still in the demographic folder, there's this one. So it says active patients who have not had a visit in the last 12 months, they have no future appointments and they're not created in the last 6 months. So in theory, they're not a new patient that we've just created. They also don't have any future appointments, so they're not coming in the foreseeable future. And they also haven't been for 12 months. If I double click on that again, it looks a little bit hectic. I could then just run that query. I am going to make a slight minor change to it though. So if you do want to venture a little bit into the text, so I've got this here, this number 12, and it's got the comment next to it that says the number of months since their last visit, and it's 12 by default. We might want to change that though. Maybe we say, okay, it's not 12 months, we want 24 months instead. We want to really make sure that they haven't been for a while. I could override that number. I could run that query. So for me, I've got, pretty much a third of my database that I don't have a visit in 2 years for. These are the people that typically you would go and mark inactive in their file. Instead of you individually going and doing this, you can just go up to file and you can mark all of them as inactive in here in one sort of foul swoop, obviously making sure that list is accurate. But mark as inactive in here, it'll say everyone will be that's in the list. Are you sure that's what you want to do? We would say yes to that. I'm going to say no to it. It would then go and say, okay, well, you've now marked 34 patients inactive. Why would you want to mark patients as inactive? Obviously, it's a bit more of an accurate reflection of your data, but also it will make your searches a little bit quicker because usually the searches will just be on active patients. But if you go and mark inactive, it will just make that a little bit quicker when you're booking appointments or just doing any kind of patient search. That's the database search. Have a look in the knowledge base though after this if you're keen. Just search for database search. There was a webinar that we ran probably about a year or so ago now. It is lumped in with editing templates, but have a look at that. There's also sort of just some other articles as well and helping with how to kind of put in some extra criteria as well. And if you are working sort of with some buddy sites and things like that, potentially if you make a query where you're like, oh, this is really cool, it shows this list of patients, this is just text. So you can copy that text, give it to someone else who uses BP, and they can obviously run that same query on their database if you've sort of got some people that you can share with as well. But let me hop out of that. A few clinical tips and a few management tips from here. I'll just go to the clinical record because I've already got it open anyway. Just a few, I guess, probably random things, whether you know them or not. First off, let's have a look just in past visits in here. So you do obviously have, that you can filter on their reason for visit. You can also do a search for a word somewhere within their note. I mean, in a perfect world, reason for visit might show what we're looking for, but you can also search and say I write a word and do a search. Anything that then gets highlighted in red in here is somewhere where that word is within that big long consult note. So it's not necessarily the reason for visit, it's just within their note somewhere. Obviously diabetes for these ones, but if I go and double click at this past visit, it's because they've got the word diagnostic in the note. So that's kind of cool that you can search through all of those notes. This hide non-visits here, I mean, obviously more non-visit notes, maybe the nurses or reception are putting in some non-visit notes around sort of not consult related things, but things that they want to record. Depending on sort of what online booking system you use, sometimes they will put their contacts back in as non-visit notes. Just depends on sort of what your setup is. It's typically ticked by default, but sometimes you'll have the doctors say like, oh, like, why can't I see that note that the nurse wrote about whatever they wrote? It'll typically just be because in here they're only looking at consult or visit related notes, and they would need to tick that to hide, or sorry, to, unhide them. And then in here, I don't have any actually for this patient, that's a shame. But then you could see your non-visit notes in here as well if you needed to. Resending e-scripts if you had to. So doctors don't have to re-prescribe medication if it's just that they've sent the e-script token to the wrong place, or they've sent it to their email, but they also want a copy on their phone. It doesn't mean they get two things they can dispense. It just means that they have two copies of the same token. So once it gets dispensed, obviously all those tokens are kind of null and void after that anyway. You do need to do it through past prescriptions in here, and they just need to find, whatever's in here as a e-script, which I don't have any. Give me 2 seconds. I'm going to go and actually prescribe something super quickly through here because Bonnie does not have any e-scripts in her history. I'll just do these options. That'll do. All right, so I'll script it the first time and I'll go say to her email, just as an example, and I'll try and e-script this. Fingers crossed my ERX is working. Course it's not working. Always, always for show. In past prescriptions, though, it would say in here, let me cancel all of that. It would say in here, though, that it was sent via eScript, and you can just right click on that. And instead of it saying reprint, it will say resend the token, and you then get to say where you want to resend that token to, and then you just resend it. Sorry that that's not quite working in this environment for me. Also, off the back of those medications that have been prescribed, you can right click on them and you can open the visit. Sometimes helpful for the doctors, they might want to have a bit of a read as to why that medication was prescribed in the first place. So they can open that visit, read the note, and kind of work out what they want to do from there. Obviously, in today's notes, we've got the autofills. Just as a bit of a side note, you don't have to be in a clinical record to go and add autofills in. They are the same autofills that you can get to through the word processor on the main screen. You do just have to go to insert an autofill in here, but for me, it's the same list as what I access through the clinical record. So they don't have to open, like your test patient or something to be able to put them in. When you're adding them in, actually, I might just edit this one instead. So, I mean, we've obviously got potentially AI scribes in the mix now as well, that they may not be sort of free typing sort of their notes as much as what they used to. But if they are using any autofills, especially if they're using them as a bit of like a checklist for things, like whether that be a questionnaire, so they always ask the same questions and they put their answers next to it, or whatever that kind of looks like. If they use that up arrow within the autofill, when they're actually filling it in, they can actually go Shift F5 and it takes them to where those up arrows are. That does make it a lot easier for them just to write their answer next to whatever it is that they're talking about, instead of them having to go back to the mouse, move the mouse down a line, then type what they need to type, grab the mouse again, rinse and repeat. Sometimes that can be good for them to put those little up arrows in. It's above the 6 on the keyboard if they want to use them. Also, just within the clinical record, under utilities, you've got patient messages. So we won't talk about internal messages or the F8 messages, but you can obviously message internally about patients, and you can link messages to patients when you're sending messages around. What this utilities and patient messages does is any message that has been sent that's been linked to this patient will show up in here. So it might be, something that you didn't send or you didn't receive, you had no idea, but it's been linked to that patient. So you will see it in here in patient messages, and you can have a read as to whatever it was that got sent in the first place. Also, just in utilities, there is this deleted clinical data. So it's just a little bit of a, hey, I went into a record, I can't find some stuff I thought was in there. Maybe it's been deleted. But you can see in here what things have been deleted, when they were deleted or when they were recorded, as well as when they were deleted. And then also the user that did hopefully accidentally delete them. But what you can do in there is you can have a look at them, so you can view them or double click to have a look at it. And if it is something that does need to go back into the front end of Prem for people to look at, you can recover those things and push it back in. Similar kind of concept to what we were looking at in BP utilities around, patients and things like that. There's just a little bit more in here that you can push back if, things go missing. You can recover them through there. Probably just off the back of that, in the utilities here as well, there's also deleted clinical data on the main screen. Similar screen, but you get a bit more options that you can filter in here, because it's going to be looking for all of your patients, not just that one patient that you're in. So you might go and search for, making sure that we haven't deleted things from past prescriptions or something like that. And obviously you've got a date range here, and then you can see and you can recover from here as well. That's sometimes a little bit helpful to know that that exists. Moving a little bit more into management related things. Um, I might just bring up an invoice first. I mean, typically we'd invoice off the back of an appointment, but I'll just bring up the invoicing screen in here. Um, that's rude. Sorry, that's my dodgy virtual machine being really weird. I'll see how we go in here. If not, I might jump into a different virtual machine. The only thing I really wanted to point out in here is fields that can't be adjusted on an invoice. And again, I'm sure you've already been down this road, but if I were to save this invoice and I went back and, the doctor said, oh, actually, the item was wrong, can you fix it up? The only things that we can't adjust on an invoice is the actual provider. We've also got my service date that I can't change after the fact. And we've also got the patient that we can't adjust after the fact. So they're really good to just eyeball when you're doing an invoice to make sure that they are correct. And then if we ever needed to make any changes to it in the billing history, we can adjust it if it's not one of those three. If it is one of those three, you do need to cancel and recreate those invoices from scratch. Just while we're in here as well, more so that if we were adding an item, and let's say we're talking a bit more of a, it's going to keep being a thorn in my side. In here, I don't think it's going to let me do anything. I'll just go this one here because it's here. Down the bottom though, you've got your service details. So the three dots here, this list, so remembering that service details is information that also gets sent to Medicare when you send those claims away. Service details in here, we can pre-populate with sort of some, approved reasons or extra information that we do want to send to Medicare. Acknowledging that sometimes Medicare can be a little bit funny as to what we put in those service details or those service notes. I think it's 60 characters they limit to. They don't like special characters. They even potentially reject it if you've just put two spaces in a row, like a typo. You can pre-populate this with a list, and it does then just mean that we can come in here and double click on things and enter it in, and saves people having to manually type, and therefore the likelihood that possibly they'll put something in there that's going to get rejected. You've obviously also got your restriction codes in here as well. Separate sites, more procedural things. This biopsy was from my left shoulder. This second biopsy is from my right arm, so that Medicare know that we're not sort of trying to double dip through there. Not related would be more so, two visits on the same day. And maybe you just want to really clearly state that the second consult is not related to the first one. And you would obviously put some wording to indicate that as well. Where you can pre-populate that list though, is as long as you can get into setup and config, you can fix this up. But where that list comes from, if I scroll down a little bit, is I've got invoice notes on the left here. So that's that list that we were just looking at. So you can click on add and you can pre-populate that with all of your approved wording. It does make it quicker for reception to put them in, but it also lowers the likelihood that you're going to type something in that Medicare doesn't like, and you can put them in there. Also, just on this main screen, you do have view, and you've also got contact notes in here. So thinking as well that contact notes are more kind of admin related contact for a patient. It doesn't form part of their clinical record. It kind of sits outside of sort of, if you were to export their record, their contact notes don't form part of that record. This contact notes here is for everyone. So you can search for a patient back in the patient list, and you can, even through their demographic, you can open that individual patient's contact notes, but you can also open contact notes here essentially for the whole practice or the whole database, even if you're running multi-locations. You do get this patient field here. I'll just see if I can change this to get some data. So It's basically the same screen as what you would look at if you open it from the patient, but you do have this patient column here. So sometimes this can be helpful at reception because they will just get someone call up and say, hey, I missed a call, I know nothing. They could search for the patient, could then go into their contact notes and have a look. Or they might find it a little bit quicker just through here to come and say, yep, it was Rhonda. This is the person who, tried to contact, and whatever reason that they might write in there as well. You can filter it. So if it's like, I only want to see yesterday and today, or we are running multi-locations, I only want to look at my locations data, you can obviously choose that in there as well. But that's good to know that that exists. Just in clinical, I mean, still probably going back a little bit clinically, but you do have, like a pregnancy list, which will just show you all of your current sort of pregnancies, if that was helpful to you. You do also have actions in here. So in the clinical record, they can put an action. It might be, make sure we print out this pathology form for them on Friday and send it to them, or, whatever that might be, like an internal task as such. This actions list, though, will only show you actions once they are overdue in here. So sometimes it's worthwhile coming in here, just having a bit of a look, because then you can circle back and either say, oh yeah, I've done those things, or potentially we don't need to worry about it anymore and we can delete them from the list. But that's not bad to know if you're not already using that. Probably not to demonstrate as such, but just talking briefly probably around AI scribes to a degree. So best practice does have quite a few AI scribes that we partner with as such, sort of think of sort of all those big players. Usually we're probably partners with them in some capacity. Lyrebird is the one that I guess is a little bit more ingrained within the software, that does show as like the little blue L up the top here is the Lyrebird integration. I believe semi-recently, within the last sort of month, 6 weeks or so, Lyrebird did release like a free version of Lyrebird for BP users. There's obviously some limitations in there around sort of, the documents that they might generate. I think they only get sort of 5 or 10 of them a month or something like that. But it does give them sort of their full AI scribe. If you want to look at it, obviously go and look at it. With them as well, just with Lyrebird, because it's a little bit more ingrained, their note. So if I had a working Lyrebird, I could open it up, do the consult, they would write the note. Basically, when I say, yep, I'm finished that consult, it will put their note back in here in today's note. It also would put any observations that they verbalize within that consult back in the observations section where they should belong. So it kind of does all that automatically. Some of the other ones that sort of aren't as ingrained, it will just be a bit of a copy and paste back when they finish with their note. If you've got anyone who's interested, I mean, it's free as such. They can definitely just go and trial it and see if it's going to kind of work with what they want to do. But if you have a look on our website, which actually I might go back to that one if I can. And let me just bring up our external website again. I'll open this back up. So there is a whole partners section on our website, and it feels like that network grows every day. There's always new things in there that are kind of keep cropping up. But when you go in there and you can say, yep, just have a look, you can filter it as well to be, hey, I'm looking for AI productivity tools, or, I'm looking for online booking. And you can filter that and it will show you sort of that list of partners, and then obviously go and have a look at whatever they offer, and then work out if that's still something that you want to have a look at or not. I don't know what number we're up to with partners. I'd say we're possibly pushing the 300-ish mark, whatever the ish part is. But yeah, it feels like every day there's a new partner in that list. So if you are kind of looking at, BP might not do something natively, but it'd be really cool if it did something or other. Come and check this out and see if there's potentially a partner that's sort of already doing something that you're looking at doing. But let me hop out of there. Reminders and recalls is sort of the last thing that I had on my list to talk about. But if you do have any questions, please start putting them through the chat. If you've already put some in there, I'll circle back and have a look at them later. But let me talk about reminders and recalls first. But if you think of something, put it in the questions, start putting them in now, and I will kind of circle back and go through them when I finish talking about this. Reminders first. Again, I mentioned before, in the knowledge base, search for reminders and recalls. You will find the webinar that I'm referencing. If you want to go and have a bit more of an in-depth look, go and check out that webinar. But reminders first, if you are sending them through BP, they do show up in this clinical menu on the main screen, and you've got reminders in here. So basically, you need to select the patients that you want to show up in the list before we then send those reminders out. So in here, you've got all those different reasons that you have. So maybe you have a different SMS template if they have a specific type of reminder, like maybe it's I don't know, if it's for something and you need to remind them to bring something with them or do something or other, you might have a different sort of template that you use, and that's okay. I'm just going to select everyone in here. Whatever date range that reminder is due, it does default just to the next week, but you could extend that out to be, the next month or something like that. You can change that. Whether you want to send for all your providers or kind of pick and choose, whatever you want to do in there. But this is just going to generate a list of all those patients who are due for those clinical reminders. From here, though, so obviously I can send them off the back of BP Comms and send them a text message, or if they have no consent, I could print them out a letter or do whatever I want to do there. There is the remove from list and there is delete reminder in here. Just the difference between those two. So say I've got a big long list in here and I say, I don't want to send a reminder for that particular one for whatever reason. I don't want to delete the reminder. I just don't want to send it right now. So you can select something here and say, yep, remove that from the list. It does not delete that reminder. It just purely removes it off this list so we can send the rest of them. If we delete the reminder, though, that will go ahead and actually delete that clinical reminder. Once my list is all good, though, I can send them. And I get this little kind of similar to the database search, a little like mail mergy field that comes up. So I've got 9 that don't have SMS consent, and I've got 5 that do have SMS consent. In here, you've got the different templates that you can use, whether that's a BP Comms template or potentially a letter template. You can pick and choose what you want in there. So remember, through setup and config, you can go and add your own BP Comms templates. So you can go in there and then pick it up in here to send that message. You've got things like, combining them if they're for the same patient, so they don't get 3 different texts for different reminders that they're due for. And then obviously just click send on here. Also, just back in here, you can view their appointment. Like say if you're looking for someone, you're like, I wonder if they're already coming in. Actually, let me pick someone who might have an appointment. Let's say Bonnie probably has an appointment. So you could come in here and say, oh yeah, like she's already coming in tomorrow, maybe we won't send her another text message because, hopefully she's coming in for that particular thing. You can have a look at that if that's helpful. Once you do send them though, follow-up reminders is kind of then the sort of trying to close the loop. So you would be able to see in here all those ones that you have sent. There's lots of filtering that you can choose up the top to get a bit more of a list. From there, you could just send those reminders again if you need to. You can obviously call them and try, maybe if it's we text them 2 times and then we send it a letter, or we give them a phone call, whatever kind of that policy might be. You can record a contact note there. You can book an appointment out of here as well if you want to. You could mark a reminder as performed or no longer required just to kind of get it off the list as well if you want to. But lots of filtering that you can use. If you've got sort of online booking, a lot of them will automate reminders for you. If you do have online booking, but you're still sending sort of manually through BP, that might be something to have a look at as well. But let me hop out of here. Recalls. So probably just for a smidge of context, and then we'll go back to, I guess, where the recall list is. What the doctors will be doing when they check their results is over on the right here, they choose an action to be taken, which is like the mandatory part of them actioning their result or what they want to happen with that result. You'll probably find, and there will be a policy, 100% there'll be a policy around which one of these they should be using, but more importantly, what it actually means if they select that option. Whilst we can't edit the wording or kind of hide the ones that we're not using as such, and there is enhancement that hopefully that makes its way into a future release, hopefully at some point, we are kind of stuck with what's here, but doesn't mean that you have to use all of them. So you might hypothetically say, if they mark it as urgent, it means the nurse is going to be physically calling that patient to get them back as soon as possible or within, 24 hours or whatever that looks like. You might then say, okay, well, the other option is it's just a non-urgent appointment. So they might, just get a text message that says, hey, basically book an appointment when it's convenient for you. You could do whatever you like in here. BP, I guess, doesn't automate any of that kind of process either afterwards. All they're doing here is setting a flag against that particular result. So I'm just going to say urgent appointment as an example. So I'll close out of here. Where that recall list as such is, like the follow-up box is the little blonde person with the mobile phone on the main screen here. When I click on that, there's lots of things happening in here. It took me a very long time to get my head around how to use this screen. And, you're all sort of fairly, well, for the most part, longer sort of standing users, you've probably already got a grasp on this. But if you think of it as every result that has been actioned by the doctor or looked at by the doctor initially is within this screen somewhere, and it's the filters and things that you apply at the top as to what you're actually looking for. That sort of helped me kind of get my head around what is actually happening in here. So you've obviously got date ranges of when we've checked reports or when the doctors have checked those reports. We've then got a filter by action. So all unactioned means it doesn't actually matter what they picked. It's just that we haven't done anything with these ones yet. But you might say, okay, maybe the non-urgent ones go out through the online booking and they kind of automate to get those text messages, hypothetically, or maybe you do a mail merge through here and just send a text message to all the non-urgent ones. So we might say in here, okay, show me just the urgent ones that I'm physically calling. So in here, I've got that result for Bonnie that we just checked just before. So now I'm only looking at urgent appointments, and then this filter by status comes into play. And if you think of a result as it really goes through three statuses, one is nil, which essentially is it's new or it hasn't got to a point that we want to mark it as contacted, which is the second status. And usually you'd probably keep them in nil until you've actually booked their appointment. And just because we've contacted them doesn't necessarily mean we want to mark it as contacted, because it will move it into the next screen. From contacted, when they do go and see the doctor again, they will mark that, well, hopefully will mark that result as given back to the patient, and then they will show up on the given filter in this screen. So not that we would sort of be interested in it at given from a recall perspective, but we are interested in it from a nil or new or still trying to chase it up, and then potentially circling back to the contacted ones. Because say we've called someone, we've booked their appointment, we've marked it as contacted, so it's moved to the next screen. If, I don't know, that day comes and goes and they cancel that appointment, we would still need to have some way of sort of circling back to make sure that we definitely get those patients back for those appointments. In here, let's say, I don't know, you've got all the buttons up the top and they're fairly self-explanatory. You've got, that you can record a contact note. And when you do record those contact notes, it does change the attempts over here, and it will say, one contact attempt, and the symbol will be whatever the last contact attempt is. So say if it was an unsuccessful phone call, it'll be a red phone. So you know that last time we tried to contact them, it was a unsuccessful phone call. But every time you put a contact note in, it obviously increments up by 1 each time. You can send them just a single text message if you want to. You can view if they already have some upcoming appointments. And maybe that workflow then is that you go and edit that existing appointment to be a recall instead of like a standard appointment. And maybe you don't necessarily have to contact them again because they're already coming in tomorrow. You could add a clinical reminder through here if you really wanted to as well. And you can make an appointment through here. And when you do make an appointment, it does default to that recall type of appointment, which is important because if receptionists are cancelling those recall appointments, it does give them a pop-up saying, this is a recall. Are you sure this is what you want to do? And they have to hit yes to that. But also, when we're looking at the appointment book and kind of coming back to the how do you make sure they come back, in this list here, say if I just cancel this one, so it says, are you sure this is what you want to do? Yes, I'm sure. Why is that? I don't know, whatever it might be. Also in view, you've got cancelled appointments. So in here, the recall ones are in yellow. So they really stand out in whatever period that you're looking for, that hopefully there's also then some process to make sure that we are rebooking those ones in at some point to get those results back to them. Sorry, just jumping back into here again. Oh, already had that open. Hang on, I'll hop out of that one. I'll go back to where we were. So still nil status, say I did call them, I record a contact note, I've booked their appointment. I would then possibly be looking at marking that as contacted because it takes it off of the nil status screen and moves it into the contacted screen in here. And I've still got all the same options. I can still record contact notes. I can still look at when their actual appointment is. Also, when you're looking for appointments in here, if you look in here and there's no future appointments, you're like, oh, hang on, what's going on there? You can also include their past appointments in this view as well. So you can see, they were supposed to come in here yesterday, but that didn't happen. Let's go and try and get them back in again at a more suitable time. Obviously, then when the doctors see them, they mark that result as given. It would then move to the given status in here. Again, if you have a look at that webinar, it does kind of go through that in a lot more detail. One more thing, and then I'll go back and read all those questions, is if you're thinking, my doctors just keep forgetting to mark that result as given and it keeps clogging up my recall list and I don't know what's like a legitimate recall and what's not, in setup and preferences, and as sort of a PM sort of level user, you would be able to come in here and choose another user that you can set a preference for. In the clinical screen, so there's probably two things in here I'll point out. I'll talk about results first and I'll come back to the other one. In here, you've got display unactioned report list in the patient record, and then you've also got pop-up unactioned report list when closing the patient record. So what that's talking about is results that have been checked initially by the doctor and they're essentially on that recall list and they haven't been given back to patients yet. It will show up in the notification section in the record, but also it's going to pop up when they close the record to say, hey, you've got results that you have not marked as given. And it actually gives them the opportunity to say, oh, I did talk to them about that. And they can say, yep, mark that as given as part of closing the record. Sometimes just turning them on has sort of increased that sort of them marking them as given and making that recall list a bit more of a sort of more accurate list. If you've potentially got a provider that's really bad at marking results as given, and you've turned these two on, you've let it kind of sit for a couple more months and they're still not quite doing it, if you want to be a little bit more annoying about it, there is this pop-up preventative health list when opening the patient record. I know it talks about preventative health, but it also puts the results in there. So if that's turned on, they'll get it when they open the record. It'll say, hey, you've got results you need to give back. And then if you've got these ones turned on, it's obviously then going to show up when they close the record as well. So hopefully at some point through there, they will remember to mark as given. Just while we're in here and around, I guess, good data as well, you've got your entry of reason for visit for whatever it is. You've got two options. One is you can prompt them, which basically means if they don't diagnose, they don't do a procedure, and they don't do a reason for visit, it's going to prompt when they close the record to say, hey, you forgot to do this, but they can still say, no, thank you, and close it, and you haven't recorded that reason for visit against that consult. Whereas you can enforce it, which literally means they cannot physically close that record until they've put in a reason for visit as part of that consult. So you've got those options there. Questions. I wonder how many questions are in the chat. Hang on, I'm just gonna go back through. There's a few questions. All right, I'll see where I can get up to with answering things. Any chance you could go back over how to use autofill to create templates? Not so much to create templates, but in the word processor, the plain piece of paper, you can go to insert and you've got autofill here, but these are the same autofills as what they have access to in the clinical record. So you can come in here and you can pre-populate a heap of autofills and share them with everyone without actually being in like the test patient as such. Sometimes they like to do it and not having to open up an actual clinical record. Why can't we change the provider if we need to adjust an invoice? That's a really good question. I don't 100% know the answer to that. I'm assuming that it's got something to do with how it stores that data in the database, and then obviously making sure that it's all kind of, all the changes are made in the right places so that when the core information of it gets sent to Medicare, that I guess there's no remnants of sort of what it was potentially previously. I don't 100% know, but it is just a limitation that's there. I'm not sure if that's sort of on our end programmatically or if that's something that Medicare has somehow stipulated. I'm not 100% sure. I'm sorry for that question. Can you recover a document that was emailed but not saved? Such a good question. It should say that it was emailed in their contact note, but I don't know if it actually stores a copy of the email itself. I half think that it doesn't for some reason. I would possibly think then no at the moment, but I have been down this rabbit hole before and I'm fairly certain that that's like an enhancement to kind of make that a little bit more foolproof probably through there, that it does. I mean, when you print a document, it automatically puts it in correspondence out. The same as when you secure message a document, it automatically puts it in correspondence out. So why are we not saving it as part of emailing it as well? I might go and put a vote on that as well. So I'm just reading your question, Sandra, just the summarized version for everyone. Basically, when you go into BP utilities and in your uncoded list, there's lots of stuff. Most of it is that you've got the question mark sort of in the front of it. No, there is no way to delete them. You would have to go and clean them up as such. And is it advised if the question mark maybe isn't confirmed? I mean, usually what they would do with that question mark is they're usually indicating that you're right. It's not a confirmed diagnosis. It's like a provisional diagnosis. They're not quite sure yet. But regardless, when they are putting in a diagnosis if I come back into here, there is a tick box in here that they can say provisional. So there's nothing stopping them from clinically coding the diagnosis, but also saying it's provisional for now, which will still fix our coding issue, but also, help with the provisional diagnosis part. But yeah, there's no magic fix, which is why I said to sit down when you look at it, because it can be quite lengthy in there. It is just a one by one to go and kind of fix them up. Mail merge. So I mean, really, you've got the mail merge out of reminders if you're doing reminders through BP, but you've also got that mail merge out of the database search that we looked at earlier, where basically generate your list of patients. If I jump back into there quickly, so you've got your search, generate your list of patients, and then you can come up to file and you can do a mail merge in here, which again, if they've got SMS consent, we can text them. If they don't, then we would be printing letters for them, or we just say we want to capture the SMS and not worry about the letters. You can obviously then go and make up your own BP Comms template to use. You can also open up or make your own template that you want to use just through the word processor like you would normally make templates, and then you pick that one to send that one out. Sorry, I'm just reading some of these. Vivian, is there a way that we could insert another document from correspondence, say if you're running like a referral, but then you also want to put in a copy of their care plan? Not at the moment. The closest you can get for now, which is a little bit further advanced than what we were probably 6 months ago, is whilst you can't sort of write your referral and then insert like your care plan into that referral, you can send the referral, but then in your correspondence you do have the option that you can, it says email copy to patient, but it's email a copy of that correspondence. So you can come in here and you can email a copy of that also to wherever it is that you sent that referral to. Yes, it goes through as two separate things, but that's probably the closest you can get to sort of including those other correspondence in that referral. I also know that is an enhancement as well. I'll go and put another few votes on that as well, because I agree that would be really awesome. It's to do with the formatting of the documents and the language and the software of the word processor, and that sometimes it just doesn't quite like talking to each other. Why do nurse billing items like the 10997 not come through as green for billing once the nurse finalises the visit? So reception can clearly see that the item is ready for bulk billing. It's because nurses are not billing providers. So even though I know the nurse is the one doing that particular item code, the billing provider still needs to be the doctor themselves. And I guess the logic in the software anyway is that the doctor drives their billing. So when they finalise the visit, they should know that the nurse has done that sort of on their behalf, and that they include that within their finalising the visit, because when it gets sent to Medicare, it gets sent under the provider. It doesn't get sent anything to do with the nurse. So it's just making sure that they're well aware of what items essentially that they are claiming for, is sort of why that's designed that way. Can we make the messages box larger? No, as in like the internal messages, I assume that you're talking about, Susano. No, it is what it is. You are right. There's definitely things that this can do better as well, and that it also kind of does go down to the bottom, which may not be ideal. I know that there's enhancement already around this. I'll go put a few votes on that as well for you. Is there an option where once a bulk billed account is placed on hold and the patient returns another day to provide consent, the claim can still be processed through Tyro? Currently, the only option is to print and obtain a patient signature, which is not eco-friendly when we have a Tyro machine. Yeah, that comes back to it's a limitation somewhere in the mix there with obviously the service. Like when you put that account on hold, the service date is still the original date, not the date that you go and essentially take it off hold. No real magic fix there. I would be curious though to see, there's going to be changes in there come July with the assignment of benefit changes anyway. So I would be curious. Maybe that's a little bit of a watch this space at the time, at right now. Give it a few months, and I think that that landscape will change probably a little bit as well. But yeah, at the moment, what you're doing is essentially what you can do. But I would definitely be watching that space for a few months' time. Kylie, sorry, Suzanne, I'll come back to yours because you've got a few in there, and I'm also running out of time. When will you create a template for the mental health care plan that can display in the enhanced primary care section? Such a good question. There's a lot of areas in the software like that that probably just need a little bit of loving. They are on the list. It's just that with some of those sort of government changes that are happening at the moment, that's essentially where all that development is taking place for now. Couldn't give you a timeline on when some of those areas are going to get that love, but it is on the list. Yeah, can shortcuts be added without needing to open the letter writer each time? For example, one-click access for medical certificates and common forms customized to suit each practice. No, that's probably one little difference between like Praxsoft and BP is that you can't kind of assign your own sort of shortcut keys. Just with the medical certificate, there is the icon next to the plain piece of paper, which is a medical certificate, but that's essentially as close as we can get to sort of our own. There are keyboard shortcuts, Susanna. I'd have a look at them. If you look in the KB, yeah, it possibly is a little bit more click heavy than potentially Praxsoft. Definitely, there are some sort of more major differences in the management side between Praxsoft and BP than maybe what the clinical is. Sort of the doctors tend to adjust a lot easier from that change from medical director. I've always sort of spoken to people that it is a bit of a harder change to come from Praxsoft. I would look at the keyboard shortcuts to see if potentially any of them might help you out. Unable to move patients around in the waiting room. For example, if a nurse finishes with a patient, we cannot move that patient up the list for the doctor to see next. Currently, we need to unarrive and re-arrive everyone. Yeah, that's not ideal. Patient needs to be triaged and moved up the waiting list is not possible. You're not wrong, but I would also be looking at, like obviously in the waiting list, I would be using that details column a little bit more. So even though you've got someone in the waiting room, if you right click on them, you can edit their appointment details and you might say they need to see this person before anyone else. You can also technically mark them as urgent, which will change their colour in here to be the red. Maybe that's the indicator to the doctor that they need to see those ones first. But I would be using the details field to be, hey, they've already seen the nurse, you just need to do your quick, head in type look. Use the details field for that. Yeah, unarriving patients and re-arriving all of them, that sounds like madness. No, you can't add your own appointment type icons at the moment. That is also an enhancement request as well. There's not that many to choose from, you're right. But what you've got there is sort of what you've got for now. Sorry, I'm doing one last check. I'm sorry if I missed any questions. I'll do one last check through. One more for you, Susanna, and then I'm going to go back up to the top to see if anyone else wrote anything else. Can you provide templates that are ready to import? There's lots of templates that are already provided. They get updated with the monthly data update anyway. There are potentially some more documents you might find in the knowledge base, maybe, that you can download. PHNs also have a lot of RTF forms that have been made in BP that you can import them as well. It's just trying to find out where you get them from. But essentially, the ones that we supply for the most part will be in the program itself. Kylie, is there a way that Proto Authority scripts can open up directly from the script writer and complete? That would be so cool. Not within BP. Not that I am promoting any of our partners above any other partner, but have a look at MBS Pro. I've heard that they potentially can help with that. I don't 100% know, but just have a bit of a look at them. They are obviously a partner. Not that I'm recommending anyone over anyone else, but just I've heard of that if you want to have a look at it. I think I nearly answered everything. I'm sorry if there was anything. There's probably one I think that was far down the scroll that I may have missed. We are short of time. Thanks so much for hanging out. Hopefully, there's something in that mix that you've taken away for your Friday. Thanks also to the North Queensland PHN for making it happen. I think it's really awesome that we get to sort of engage a little bit closer with the practices and the PHNs as well. If you do happen to have any questions that I missed, please email them through just to training@bpsoftware.net, and then I can reply back to that and find you answers for them as well. But otherwise, thanks so much for coming, and we'll get that recording out. It'll end up on the PHN's website, so you can rewatch it if you need to. But otherwise, have a lovely rest of your Friday and a fantastic weekend. Thanks, everyone.